can work effectively inside a development bureaucracy to help that bureaucracy be better at promoting women's empowerment. Now, you're a feminist. Tell me how it is that you chose to work in the OECD Development Cooperation Department.
Well, I think you know as well, Rosalind, it's never easy being a feminist in the bureaucracy. And I have worked in several bureaucracies. So I think this is probably also the right point of my career to be in somewhere like the OECD, because I've worked in union bureaucracies, I've worked at a high level in national government administrations, and in 2 departments at least, and now I am working at the OECD, and I think it's the right point of my career to go global.
How is it possible, and how does one go about trying to change a bureaucracy so the bureaucracy can actually play this transformative role that a feminist is seeking?
It's a very interesting question, and one I've obviously reflected on, I think certainly over the last 10-15 years. And I often think of that famous quote about how you can't use the master's tools to destroy his house. And so I think I've thought a lot about this transformation thing, because I think you can use the master's tools to renovate his house, to add rooms to his house, make it your house, and certainly to improve the view. And I think that is probably the way that I've thought about it, because I think that there are things that can be changed, and you have to make it in the bureaucracy's interest to know that actually they improve. But there's lots of hard things to do with that, because I think one of the things that we can get tied up with, and we've really got to think hard about this as feminists, we can look too much like fundamentalists. We can sometimes be too politically correct and miss the opportunity to actually make at least some steps towards change. I mean, I think we're talking about 2 sets of things. We're talking about transforming the lives of women, and we're also talking about transforming bureaucracies so that they become a tool in transforming the lives of women. So I think we've got to think about, we've got to be able to unpick it, and we've also got to be able to know what we're doing at any one point and why. And I think one of the difficulties is that we have to take some quite complex ideas to be sure that the messages are targeting the right audiences and at the right time, and that they can buy that message and run with it. It's really hard. This is all hard. It's worth the effort, though, in my view. And I think that's why I keep on doing it, because it is worth the effort. And I see change and I see improvement.
Well, is your senior management always aware exactly what you're up to?
Of course not. And sometimes, in fact, one of the tactics is to stay beneath the radar. I mean, what you have to be able to do is to be able to scan your own organisational culture and to see where the opportunities are, to see where the allies are, and you have to be able to look at the broader political landscape to recognise where the political opportunities are. I guess it is a framework for thinking. So you can do that with how you're going to shift things, who you're going to shift, who is worth the effort of shifting.
Okay, let me push you a bit. If you had to kind of list the 4 or 5 key elements that makes a feminist effective inside a development bureaucracy.
Interesting. I guess some of these are going to sound like just flip comments, but creating win-win situations. I think you've often heard me also say that I think one of the problems that we sometimes have as feminists is we can look too much like we're the policeman, too much like we're the enforcer. And in fact, I think it's very important that we get alongside our colleagues. And for some of us, that can actually be coaching and mentoring our colleagues. Creating demand so that they actually come back to you because they realise that you made their job better. that you made their programming better. Those sort of things, I think, are really important. But I think I'm probably, the one I think is most important is build alliances. So you find allies. But I think what, you asked me a question earlier about, do my managers know what I do some of the time? I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is also form alliances that sometimes people characterise as inside-outside. But we can create pressure from the outside on us by working with the non-governmental organisations. But at the same time, we can also, and we have to make that a really mutual relationship. The pressure from them, from the outside, is really good. It can sometimes be really uncomfortable for us, and it's quite important that we don't become defensive if it is uncomfortable. And it can even be irritating sometimes. But you have to, you know, there are ways of working with that. At the same time, I think we need to also show them that, demonstrate and be really clear that we're listening really hard and that we are taking on board that criticism and what they're saying, and also to give information back.
So a trusting relationship is both kind of, you know, not telling others what you're up to at certain times. It's about actually challenging each other constructively and recognising complementarity and building on the complementarity.
And it's mutual respect.
And mutual respect.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, I think that's really important.
But some feminist bureaucrats get very nervous about being in contact with people outside the bureaucracy. Particularly perhaps in government bureaucracies where civil servants are not meant to have a political position on anything. So sometimes, and I say it frankly myself, you can finish up by sailing very close to the wind.
Absolutely. And again, as I say, if you share with them the very real difficulties, I think you get some empathy happening. I mean, you're empathising, but they start to understand the complexities of the environment or the political environment within which you're working. And you better understand what they're needing and pressing for. And, I mean, again, as I say, I think that in building that trust, mostly, you know, it's people don't report what you're saying if they trust you and if they know you're being honest. I think because of the determined way in which I've been working, you're constantly creating, recreating and changing the political conditions in which you work to make the outcomes more inevitable and more positive. And I think I've done that in a number of fields. So it isn't just intuition at all. Interesting, I've always been a person who's, I used to feel like I solved the world's problems as I walked to work. Because if I'd had a dark night of the soul, I'd think, well, what is it that I'm going to do today and what am I going to shift? And I'm saying that from when I worked in the trade union movement, when I worked at a women's ministry. I think that the rear window vision can actually help you quite a lot to think, what did I do well, what did I do less well, what would I do differently next time? Those are a good set of questions to be constantly asking yourself.